Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today, my guest is Miss Jasmine Lane, an educator here in Minnesota who's going to stay permanently in the state of Minnesota and never leave her position or post to go anywhere ever besides Minnesota. Good morning, Jasmine Lane. How are you doing?
Morning, Chris. I'm good.
Yeah. Is that an accurate setup for you? That you're never going to leave us in a million years.
I don't know about the never. I don't know about the never.
Yeah. We should never say never. Minnesota might lose me given the way that things continue to trend the wrong direction in my mind. We do a very good job in Minnesota of talking the talk without walking the walk. We have the world's best kind of marketing on the standard of living and quality of life, and the world's worst fact checking on how that standard of living and quality of life actually work for people of color. And no place is that more evident than in education. Within education, we boast some of the world's best schools. We pat ourselves on the back for how great education is for the kids of Minnesota. And oftentimes when we're doing this boasting and bragging, and I shouldn't say we, but when some Minnesotans do this bragging and boasting from a very high level about how great we are, one of the things that they often do is they say, but. So this is what the but is. I mean, we're the greatest place in the world. We have great schools. We have, some of the best educators in the world. We're amazing. Blah, 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 blah. But for, Latinx kids, Black kids, kids of color in general, Native American citizens, we got some work to do. Yeah, we got some work to do, Got some work to do. We got more than some work to do. We are abysmal. We are a tale of two states. And the Twin Cities are a tale of two cities. Night and day in the performance. And when I say performance, the outcomes for people of color, especially in schools. I locate the problem in the system not being serious about pedagogy and the mechanics of schooling, the things that you can do actually to know that you're using science and matching that to the needs of kids and improving your systems over time. And what we are is we are a lover of fads. The Twin Cities, what I've seen over time is the two Twin Cities love them some fads. Boy, they vote them in left and right. Every 2 years, every 1, 2, 3 years, new reading program, new kind of curriculum structure, new way of seeing the world, never based on anything. Just seems weird to me. So that's my setup, Jasmine Lane. I do want to talk to you about something more than that too. I do want to talk to you about the canon, the classics, teaching current events in the classroom, and this moment that we're in where both woke people and anti-woke people are getting on my nerves. And yes. I have a sense that you're in a similar place. And that's really what I want to talk about too, is where is there a place for us who get annoyed by the woke and the unwoke folks? And don't let me put words in your mouth. Let me just ask you, check with you. Is that where you're at too right now?
Yes. We're just gonna call them. I think last time I talked to you, we called them the overwokes.
Yes, overwoke.
I can't take them. And then I'm anti woke, but also I'm not pro woke.
Right.
Somewhere in between that.
Yeah, because they both get on my nerves right now, and I wish they would go away.
Do y'all think that's what it's just like? Do you hear what you are saying? Yeah. You're saying that it's racist to teach kids to use a different set of grammar. We're just not going. We're just not going to teach. We're just not going to teach them. That's what they're saying. I'm just like,
no. It's racist to expect them to do better because of where they come from and who they are. It's racist to not just concentrate and focus on things outside of the classroom, but to also focus on inside the classroom. My one that's really getting on my nerves a lot, that listen, people on all sides of the fence disagree with me on this. It's really just this standardized testing is the problem. It's not a barometer. It is the actual problem. It is actually racist to test kids. And standardized testing is rooted in racism and all these other things. And I just hate that we get lost in the wrong talking points sometimes, because I want to know how kids are doing. I want to know how my kids are specifically doing. Last Saturday, dropped them off to do their MCAs, which are our state tests for those who are listening and watching. This Saturday, we have to drop them off for the second part of that. It took them an hour right, to do the reading portion. It's going to take them an hour to do the math portion. And that is an hour well served to me for the information that's going to give us back in a month or so. Actually, the results come back pretty quick. So it's even faster than that. So I'm not here for everything is racist, listening to people say everything is racist. But then again, I'm not here for the people who say nothing is racist.
Yep. It's like, no, there's definitely systemic racism. Yeah, but like the standardized test isn't it. No, standardized test isn't it. And, the idea that teachers might introduce some things into the classroom that make some people uncomfortable isn't the worst offense that has happened ever either. And I think that's what the anti-woke people are saying is like, oh my God, I'm being, our kids are being bombarded with the idea that racism exists in the world. And it's kind of like, yeah, okay. All right. Well, this is why I'm for school choice. So, Jasmine, this is why I'm for school choice, because I don't think we're all supposed to be in the same schools. I say it all the time. People get mad at me for saying it. But I want to share my screen just quickly with this article that kind of got me thinking day before yesterday that I bumped into your Twitter thread that you were talking a little bit about. We had this big verdict here in the Twin Cities, with the George Floyd case. I talked about it twice, 2 or 3 times this week. And, there was this question about what teachers should do about it. Like, it's a big major event. It's upsetting the normal balance of life in Minnesota. You can't just go about your business and not recognize you have the military here and had police officers everywhere, and kids are like, living in kind of like encampments. Mm-hmm. So there was arguments online about should teachers be talking about Black Lives Matter, police violence, racism, the George Floyd case in class. And I noticed that you had a tweet where your take on it was really that this is not something that you would allow to interrupt like the normal flow of what your lesson plans and what you were doing, but you would make room for people to have these conversations outside of class. So tell me more about because you said a trigger word in that tweet. You said, I'm going to keep teaching Macbeth. Which is my trigger word. I intentionally said Macbeth versus another book. Yeah.
You trolled me on that one. You was trolling. I was like, wait a second. We can't talk about George Floyd, but we're going to talk about Macbeth. I hate me some Shakespeare. So tell me about what you were seeing with the kids in your classroom. What leads you to think that it's not actually for everybody to bring these issues into the classroom?
Well, one thing is I'm thinking about myself, like my ability to process through it. Like I can't intellectualize it and not get emotional about it. Like it's a pretty important topic to me. So that's one part for me is me knowing can I be the leading adult teacher in a professional manner? Like if somebody says something stupid that I think is stupid, am I going to be able, you know what I mean? And so that's one part. But then also there are kids in that classroom that might say something really wrong and it's going to fire up some things. And so it's about protecting the kids who are triggered by this, who maybe have trauma in their families regarding it, and making sure that they don't have to sit there and listen to that like bile is basically what I'm going to call it. And just knowing, and the fact that we were online all school year, and if I was still teaching at that school, I would have only been in person with them 5 times by the time this happened. I don't trust the classroom culture to be able to sustain that. And so it's like at the beginning of the year or when things happen, it's not like I'm saying it's not allowed in this classroom. Like that's not how I'm framing it, but it really is like, if you need to talk about this, I want you to be able to say what you need to say without feeling like you're going to have to defend your right to exist. And so in order to do that, I have to make sure that the people that are there with, I'm not going to say the right way, but they're with the right heart. Because who knows, there could have been a kid that said well, maybe if he just hadn't resisted arrest, I'm not going to suscept my kids to that or myself.
So, and tell me about your classroom. Is it a mixed classroom in terms of the makeup of students?
Yeah. So I'm not going to name the school, but so I no longer work there just because of a lot of issues, but targeted racism from students and parents.
Wow. I can almost guess what schools it is then.
It was a rough year. But it's like an inner city tier 1 suburb, lots of Black kids, lots of, special ed, English as an additional language, but also maybe 20% of, working class white people. And so those, that I got a lot of you're being politically biased for teaching the Ain't I a Woman speech. And I'm like, you understand this speech is just saying that Black people deserve equal rights, right? But it's politically biased. That's the environment that I was teaching in. So I'm not going to make my kids, when I say my kids, I mean my Black students, I'm not going to make them have to participate.
Wow. Okay. So now that's interesting. And that's not a take that I would have been considering as I was thinking about this week, is we do have teachers that are under fire for any little thing that they teach. I mean, I've seen some things online with parents getting online because they're hearing what their kids are teaching. And the moment that they hear anything about Black Lives Matter or anything like that, they get triggered. And in a couple of cases have actually right in front of all the other kids on Zoom challenged the teacher, on some of these things. So and we have more of a surveillance environment, I think, on teachers now. Yeah. Parents are watching.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with people tuning in. It's not like I'm saying like my personal feelings about how I feel about the police or about current events. I don't explicitly say this is the right way to think about them. And I rarely explicitly say this is how I feel anyway, but just the fact that I mention it and the fact that I'm the only Black teacher ever in this department really triggered some of the white parents. And it's just you're a Black teacher and you're talking about Black issues and you're reading a book by a Black person. Oh my God. And I'm like, you understand what Fences is about, right? It's not about white people at all. I'm like,
see, Jasmine, I'm gonna need you as a teacher for a year or so because I think all of this is boring. Just to be very honest with you, you just mentioned Fences. I can't think of a more boring play. But anyways, keep going. See, I'm gonna get all kinds of hate mail. Listen. Anybody listening to this, watching right now, Jasmine's the educated one on today's broadcast, and I'm the Neanderthal because I think so much is boring. I subtweeted you the other day. I subtweeted you saying, the movie is always better than the book, just to see if I would bait you in. You didn't take the bait though. You didn't see it.
That's false. Honestly, Chris, I don't think you like literature.
I do, but I like.
Are you sure?
Okay, well, this is okay. Let's talk about this then, because this is part of the title of the show today. So I called this show that we're talking about right now the canon, the classics, and current events in classrooms. So what we have just been talking about are current events making it into classrooms. So how do we know the fact that that life is upset for the balance of life is upset in Minneapolis for many kids because they're seeing the military and others in their area. They know that there has been a murder again. This isn't the first one. These things keep going on and on. They know that they live in a city where their immediate surroundings are different than if they just go 2 miles away, like in the same city, right? So how do you take all of that and create a classroom where that is becoming some of the mainstay of the learning and the education? But there's all this conversation, and you're involved in a lot of these conversations online between these camps. I never knew about this war, but there's this disrupted text camp, and then there's this canon classics camp, right? Now, I love you and have a lot of respect for what you do and listen to you and read you and consider you to be like kind of an expert and a guide on some of these things. But I always fall in that other camp, the disrupted text camp, because I don't get the canon. And who's made up and who's usually in that canon to me just doesn't make sense for my kids of color. It just does not make sense to me that we would put so much importance and weight into people's. It's almost like reading other people's email for a living. I don't really get it. So help me understand, maybe I don't like literature, but I definitely don't like dry, old, tired literature. But you're not in the disrupted text camp. You are definitely in the classics camp, and help me understand that. What's rich about that?
Well, one, I guess I'm not like the idea of like disrupting a text, I just feel like it's kind of like, if you're a good English teacher, you're talking about those things anyway, because that's just part of your subject knowledge. Like, I don't know, like, are you saying that when you talk about Of Mice and Men, you're not talking about the N-word, you're not talking about like income inequality? So it's like, if you know your subject, you don't need to do that. But then also, I just think that they say some stupid things, like Shakespeare has no more literary merit than anyone else. Like, I just think that's dumb, because some stuff is better than others. And people call me an elitist for that. And I'm like, I guess you can say that, but not everything is equal quality. It's just not.
Do you think that, for instance, do you think, though, that Shakespeare is better than James Baldwin?
The funny thing about that is James Baldwin was actually heavily influenced by Shakespeare.
No, but that's not my point, because I read something yesterday written about by Cornel West, where he's like defending the classics because Howard University is about to drop them, and he's defending them. I've never seen anything like it. He's written this big defense, and he was saying that Martin Luther King was influenced by the classics, and he named a couple other very prominent civil rights people, and I thought, yeah, but I'm not Martin Luther King in his time. Actually, he was living in a dearth of Black literature. I'm living in an abundance of Black literature. So I get to read his, like, the Testament of Hope, which is all of his writings. To me, seems more interesting and profound than Shakespeare. So is it a thing about, like, as time goes on, some of these things become more or less relevant, or?
I mean, it depends. So I'll go back to your question. It's not, I don't even know if I can compare James Baldwin and Shakespeare, because they're both canonical authors, because they're both amazing at what they do. Shakespeare wrote plays, James Baldwin didn't. So it's difficult to compare that way. And that's not really the point, because they're both, we can say like which one is better, but they're both like excellent, and they're both in, the canon. But in terms of like relevance, it also, what is like your thematic arc for the year? Like, if you're talking about like the power in the individual, you know what I mean? There's lots of text that can speak to that. And when you think of it in that thematic arc, which a lot of teachers don't, that's how you make something relevant. And you don't, like, my thing is like, you don't have to like any of the books that we go through. You can disagree with every single thing, but like, that's the fun. Like, I would love to have you in my class, because you'd just be like, this is so, like, you're trying to tell me this is important because blah, blah. And then like the other kids would come at you, because like, that's the fun, is having stuff where not everyone's just going to be like, this is the most important thing I've ever read. I don't think of it that way at all.
I will say this much, Jasmine, there wasn't a single teacher that enjoyed having me in their classroom. In years of trying, that was never the case, just so you know. And I should say, and because it was worse then than it is now, in terms of teachers really not thinking that they had to include culturally relevant things, in my schooling years. It wasn't like it is now, where there's so much emphasis on it. Like, there's so many people thinking about it. I see some people in the comments that are like, nobody agrees with me on this. I get it. And the Bard, don't hate the Bard, and Robert Enlow in here is like, can't we do both? And I think by can't we do both, he's meaning, can't we do James Baldwin and
you
the Bard?
Should. So, a good curriculum is representative of the canon in time, space, gender, whatever. And that's another issue, because how many teachers have a degree in their subject versus like a degree in teaching? That makes a difference if you've taken 4 literature classes versus you have a degree. So like, my understanding of the canon, as I've written and as I've talked, it's not like only people from like Homer and, the Iliad and things like that. Like, it's
dead white guys. What we've all said is dead white guys. It's not that
at all, because the canon it's growing. It's continuing to be, if you want to be in the canon, write something really well. And like, of course. Okay,
I've seen you say this, but do you really think that other people, when they say the canon, that they share your expansive kind of idea of what could be in the canon? Like, what is canonical? People that know
literature do, yeah.
You think so? You think that they have a diverse understanding that what goes into the canon is more than the dead white guy stuff?
Yeah. I mean, and it also depends what your degree emphasized. So it's not like only what I studied is what the canon is, but it's like, if that's what you studied and you don't continue to develop your knowledge, then you're just kind of missing out. And that's like, there's things that I don't know. Like I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, my knowledge of British literature is actually pretty light. But there's a canon of British literature. I know a lot about American literature, lots of canon in there. So you know what I mean? And it's like, the canon isn't just 4 dudes from 3,000 years ago. It continues, people continue to be added. People continue to be, things that get studied. The idea of a canon is just like, these are things that are worth spending time and studying. And there's a lot of literature that's not, and that's fine because not everything is meant to be studied. Sometimes it's just meant to be consumed.
Yeah, well, I know you have an opinion about, so let me get to this thing about more contemporary writers and because you have an idea or an opinion about YA, like young adult literature. See, there go the eyes rolling. So before we get there, when you and I talk about how woke and anti-woke people are putting us in a bind right now because they are going so far into what it is that they believe, the anti-woke people to me are defending a Eurocentric norm, and they are fighting anything that breaks away from that. So that's where they're forcing all these weird things on us and telling us that Plato and Homer and all of that can no longer be the norm, the standard. They're wanting to take down our Confederate monuments. They're wanting to take George Washington off of a school name and off of the dollar, and they're wanting to replace it with Harriet Tubman and all this weird stuff and blah blah. So they are involved in what I consider to be Anglophilia. And that really is my main problem with the canon and the classics.
Those people drive me nuts because they just make us look bad. I'm like, no one even talks about Plato in high school, first of all. And you probably didn't even read Plato in college if you went to college. Like, let's be honest. Yeah. And so like, that's a misrepresentation. But then the other side where it's just like anything goes, anything is quality. I'm like, no, it's not. I tried to read a young adult book last week and I gave it 150 pages and I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, this is so poorly written. I'm like, there's just nothing here. I'm like, kids might like it and that's about it. And like, people are just like, this is the best thing ever. And I'm like, I think you're just saying that because it's someone that's not white. And that's something that also bothers me.
Would a book like The Hate You Give fall into that category?
I haven't read The Hate You Give for a couple of years. When I read it, I remember thinking, I'm like, oh my God, this girl kind of sounds like me when I talk. Or when I was growing up, like, I'm like, that's how I talked when I grew up. And then like, she like goes to a school with white kids or whatever. And so like, in that way, like, I definitely see kids liking it. But like, I can't recall like the literary quality of it, but I remember, it's also not very rigorous. Like, it's not meant to be, it's a young adult book. It's like written at a pretty low grade level. So that's also my concern is that, people put out something like they'll pull out something more rigorous, even if it is by an author that's not white. And they'll do that instead because it's easier. And so that's, that also comes into play for me is like, if you want to teach not white authors, there's lots of canon, like well-written, high quality, like important literature, like of Black people that you can pull on. It doesn't have to be this book that's not very good and came out 20 seconds ago.
Do you have like stuff that you think like is more? So when you say that, are you talking about things that are like, Zora Neale Hurston and Audre Lorde and stuff that's older, but do you find that there's any contemporary up to date, like coming out right now stuff that fits that category too?
I actually don't read a lot of contemporary literature just because I feel like a lot of it, like a lot of literature that's written isn't very good. It's just like, it just is what it is. So I kind of rely on my friends who read more contemporary literature to do that. But I just read like The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. And like, that is going to be canon. Like it's, if you're anybody who understands literature, you're going to be teaching that like in your classrooms. Like it's just phenomenal. So like, that's a newer book.
Tanji, and see Tanji, I'm getting your name right today. Tanji says there's very limited knowledge base about the literary canon simply because there's a lack of knowledge about the meaning of the word canon itself. So I know what I'm thinking when I think about the canon and canonical thinking. I'm thinking of, Moses coming down from the mountain and saying, these are the 10 commandments, right? This is the ones we've picked them. There were 100 and now there are 10 commandments out of the 100. And we selected them in some way because they have value or merit. But I actually don't believe that even people who understand the word canon or canonical thinking actually believe in the same, like I'll give you, for instance, in reading Diane Ravitch's book, The Death and Life of the American Public School. I think that's the title. I might be butchering it a little bit. She gives towards the end what she thinks should be a canon a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And the Black people on that list, I believe, are Martin Luther King and
Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass, yeah. And then the rest are like Thoreau and Shakespeare and, like all these like dead white guys. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you have in this book, Diane Ravitch just talked about how you went to this idyllic Houston public school that was all white and segregated, and the teachers were grading arbitrarily, but they owned the classroom and blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's your version of the school. And of course, this would be your canon. But this is where the disrupt text comes in for me. I don't want my kid learning the way that Diane Ravitch learned. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't want them learning that everybody who ever said anything poetic was white. I don't want them thinking that the most important things, I don't want them thinking that I'm writing something right now today where I basically make the point that there has been 108 billion people that have lived on planet Earth and walked the earth. Why would we teach that the most important things came out of a very small subset of that rather than teaching global history, world history, world literature, right? There are kids in American classrooms who are never going to be introduced to African literature, to some of the best Asian texts of history or whatnot. And if you give me kid A, who gets what we call the canon in Western world, versus kid B, who gets the sum total of all human knowledge, I'm going to go for kid B. Right?
I'm kid B.
Okay, well, help me understand when you say canon then.
It doesn't just mean America.
To Tangi's point, she thinks most people don't understand what we mean when we say that word. What is your definition of what that word means?
Canon so it's not the canon. It's not just one that no one else comes into. Every culture, every time period has their stuff. And it's just if we were going to look at this time period or, this history of whatever, this is the thing. These are the things that people have decided, or, whatever, that this is the stuff we want to keep, that kind of says something important about it. And so I wrote about this when I'm like, okay, think about literature, you guys. If you're talking about Black feminism, there's a canon of Black feminist literature. If you're talking about Russian literature, there's some canonical text for Russian literature. So every whatever has their own thing. And so it's not just even American literature. It's not just if you say that the American canon is just white people, that's just dumb. Because it just shows that you just don't know. I shouldn't be calling people dumb. Oh, well. But that's what it is. It's every single whatever you want to look at. Post-colonial literature has things that these are kind of the key things that you need to build a base level of knowledge. And that's what I'm getting at. And so for me, when I'm planning literature, again, it's the thematic arcs, but because I've studied all these different countries, I've studied post-colonial literature. I took 3 Black feminist classes. I have all of that stuff. So when I'm planning, I'm not just okay, well, I read this in high school, I guess I'll teach it too. I have that stuff in my head too. And that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on teachers needing to read. I'm the stuff is there. You just have to read it. You don't have to go to this low quality thing. That's easier to teach, and you don't have to actually teach kids how to read it. They can just read it because it's written at a 3rd grade level. A lot of YA it's written at a low grade level, and I don't like that, especially with high school.
You kind of feel like it's dumbing down what kids are capable of reading and what they're capable of understanding.
Yes. In the classroom is different than independent reading. You can read whatever you want for independent reading. I have no judgment about that. But in the literature classroom, We should be teaching things that they wouldn't see on their own, and that without a teacher to teach them, they probably wouldn't be able to get it, because that's the point of me. It's not a book club. I'm not a librarian. Like, I'm there to teach stuff. And so that's also something that I feel is getting missed, because the classrooms that I've been in where they're using YA or they're using Reader's Workshop, it's sit here and read this book for 45 minutes, and then I'll have you share with your partner for 5 minutes at the end. Multiple classrooms where I've seen that. Or it's like, we're going to do 2 choice books, and then at the end, you're going to do a 30-question multiple choice for your summative assessment. That's what's being done with the disrupt text, under the disrupt text thing. And because of our moment, which is important, and because it's most of those young adult books are by not white people, like, you can't really criticize it, because then it's like, oh, you're just saying that because the author's Black. It's like, no, I'm not. There's stuff that's to a better purpose. Like, what am I supposed to do with a book that they can fully access on their own? Like, I'm not a babysitter.
Let me give this example. So, well, first of all, let me back up and just say, the first book that I ever read cover to cover and like got all of the meaning out of the story and soaked all of the meaning out was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. It's a very weird fact about Chris Stewart. Now, at the time that I read that book cover to cover and got every piece of meaning out of it, and so felt what the young girl was experiencing in that book, it was just so weird. It was like I knew her. At that same time, we were studying something in school that I can't remember. Like one author or another that back in my time was mandatory that we did. And I wasn't reading anything cover to cover. I was skimming things because I was bored with them, and the content was not lively at all. And then the teaching wasn't very good. You know, the teaching of it was just like, either you get it or you don't, or either you're with me or don't. Yeah. Or, you know, I get paid whether you learn or not.
Yep.
This is just going to be what it's going to be. We're just going to do this for an hour. And if you don't like it, you just don't like it. And I don't have any obligation to do anything but lecture at you about it. And as a kid, I picked up on, okay, see, that's not for me.
Yep.
Right, okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's about you and your people and about your stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and check out. But at the same time, I read Judy Blume cover to cover. And it was a good experience to do that, to read it cover to cover and finish it and get every piece of meaning out of it, because that developed the muscle memory that could be done. That like I could finish a story and get all the pieces out of it. So it made me read her other books. So I think I read all of the Judy Blume books all the way up to Forever, which was her book that, you know, was about college age kids. Ooh, you know, but I would imagine you wouldn't like any of her work, but it was my gateway into reading other complete stories. I always was able to read nonfiction pretty well, but it was fiction that always kind of still is a challenge for me, reading fiction. Okay, so that's a big lead up to say like Twilight, the book Twilight in the Twilight series, right? I'm sure you love that as part of the canon, isn't it? Twilight. So when those books came out, Stephen King torched the author of those. He said it was the worst trash he ever read. I mean, he just like savaged her in a way that was just like just terrible. But Stephen King's books are very good. He's a contemporary writer, and he could savage her because he's very good at what he does. Would you put an author like him, for instance, and his books like The Shining or others up at that level of quality that if you read them, you would be getting deep meanings out of things? It is fairly rigorous. It is great storytelling.
Depends on the thematic arc. And honestly, I haven't read any Stephen King books, so I can't really say. But I know that, like, if I was teaching creative writing, we would definitely be reading a Stephen King book, because there's a lot. He has so many books that you can pull from, and you can use that as an example. So, like, it's not like the canon is like, you're in, you're out. Like, it's pretty fuzzy. It's pretty fuzzy, like who is in and who's out. It just depends, like, what the purpose is. And again, like, because I haven't read any books cover to cover, I can't talk too much about it. Just because, like, I don't like talking without knowledge, which is what I feel like a lot of people do.
That might be me on Macbeth. You know,
just to let you know, we read Macbeth and we read Things Fall Apart in my classroom. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right, well, I have a question about Macbeth, but before I say that, I want to say Tanji has a quote here that I think is very important. It comes down to the difference between an understanding of a versus the. And there's a difference between a canon
100%
of literature and not the canon. That's my biggest problem in a nutshell.
The canon does not exist.
That's my point. That actually solves everything for me. Tanji, thank you so much for that, because that solves my problem. Because what I will say oftentimes to people that push the canon is that's a canon and your children are welcome to it.
Yep.
But in this house, I have a canon.
Yep.
And
Black Panthers have a canon.
Black Panthers have a canon.
This is the stuff that you're gonna read. Like everyone has, like, if you're gonna be a part of us, this is the stuff that we believe that we're gonna pass down to you. That's what canon means for me. It's like, this is the stuff that you need to know. A canon. It's not B at all.
Now you got me. Now I'm feeling it more, because I feel like that is always my problem when other people are telling me that the canon is their canon, that their canon is the canon, and it's all them. It looks all just like them.
Yeah,
I'm thinking,
that's wrong.
Of course you would say that. Of course you would say that, because you want everybody else to be normed to you.
Yeah.
Okay, Macbeth. Why is Macbeth good?
Why is it good?
Yeah, why is it good? Why is it good?
I mean, one, I love the Shakespearean tragedies. Like, you know that everyone's gonna die, but the way that they die is so wild. It's just like, who came up with this?
Yeah.
Like, that's what it's like. But then also, like, the way that kids interact with it, you think that they won't, but like, there was so much laughter when we were studying it, and like joking, and like, what? Like, kids getting so into it, just because the stuff that's going on is so crazy. Like, it kind of just, you get wrapped up in the like insanity of the story. But then also there's just like I at the beginning of the book, I asked them, I'm like, so if your like life partner, like, I didn't say husband or wife, because I just, whatever. I was like, so someone you're in a deep relationship with, they get into trouble. Like, do you stand by their side, or do you say like, deuces, like, sorry, I'm out? And the class was split. And I had them think about that question, because in Macbeth, like, Macbeth literally kills someone, and then Lady Macbeth is like, okay, you can't finish it, I'll finish it for you. And then they're like, oh, I don't know if I would have stayed with that. And then so it's like, that's the fun stuff. It's not just like, this is the greatest thing that's ever been written. Like, I mean, I did that with Things Fall Apart. I'm like, this is one of the most important books that's ever been read. Because it is ever been written. But I'm not like, you have to love this. I never do that. I think that's not the point. But like, and also like the language is fun. Like, some of the soliloquies are just like insane. And then like,
let me ask you about that too. Do you read it in the original language like that?
Yeah.
All that weird ballart, blah blah. It's not like
my kids did.
Is there like a Good News Bible version? You know how the Good News Bible puts things into common English, like, regular. You
can read the No Fear Shakespeare, but it takes all the fun out of it. Just watch the play. Yeah, the No Fear Shakespeare is boring. Like, it's just like, it's like someone that like has maybe they took like one writing class in college, just read Shakespeare, and then just put it in regular boring prose. Like, it's not fun. If you want, you could also read the Tales from Shakespeare. They take the plays and they put them into like literary prose. So those are fun if you want to get like an introduction or a feel for the plays. But I would honestly recommend, if you're not someone who's studied Shakespeare, like with someone, you're probably not going to be able to pick it up and read it. So just watch the plays.
Instead of
they're really fun to watch.
So you have kids, city kids, that are engaging with the language. And it's coming alive, and it's fun for them, and they're engaging with it. That to me is actually, well, it's a good thing to hear that's actually taking place. It's not the way that I was taught. Actually, the way I taught was very much like, we don't care whether this engages you or not, or whether you care about it. It was very much like, it was very much like, this is the world's knowledge. If you don't like it, that doesn't matter. Like, this is just it. This just is what it is. And it was even worse than that, because it was almost like the smart kids of you will read it and get it on your own, and the dumb kids, it's just, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you should be an auto mechanic. I mean, that's the way it was really taught.
No, not for me. And like, I told them about in my story with Shakespeare. Like I was doing a Shakespeare class. Like it was just Shakespeare, and I was really afraid because I'm just like, this is gonna be hard, and like I don't really know if I'm supposed to be here. Like all the imposter syndrome with being like at a predominantly white institution, yada yada yada. And so in that class, we read 12 Shakespeare texts in one semester.
Jeez, damn.
But in the beginning, I was just like, oh my God, this is so hard. I don't get it. But then part of our work was to submit 3 questions about what we had to read for the day. And one day, my professor said my name and like brought up my question and posed it to the class because he thought that it was a good question that could elicit a lot of response. And that was when basically, it was just that. It was just like, I can do this too. Like, I can do, like, it's not like something that's not for me. It's just like, it can be for me if I want it to be. And so that's the story that I told my students. I'm like, you don't have to like it, but I hope you get something out of it. And it also allows you to know, like, you can do whatever you want. Like, there isn't any text that's off limits to you. You don't have to like it. You don't have to read it for pleasure. But should you choose to, now you have the skills to be able to go through it. And to have some confidence with that. And so that's how I framed it.
So there's a comment here somewhere that says Shakespeare requires great pedagogy. And I guess that's what we're saying right now. Like yes. The two of us, you know, you had great pedagogy. You're delivering great pedagogy, but you also had it before you became a teacher. I actually had bad pedagogy. I
think most classrooms do.
Have bad. You think most classrooms have bad pedagogy?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Really? That's a pretty stunning assessment.
The things that I have seen English teachers do make me cry.
Wow. Yeah. Like, say more.
I'm going to talk at you for 60 minutes about what you read from the book. Take notes. I'm going to talk at you for 20 minutes and then give you a low-level activity. We're going to read the No Fear Shakespeare aloud, and then you have, like, go look up quotes. Like, there's no actual discussion of what's going on in the book. Like, just like, like, look at what Lady Macbeth just said. She says, if I told you that I was going to kill my kid, I would do it. So you have to kill the king. Like, that was her reach. He was like, basically, if you don't, you're not a man. The kids were like, what? What does she mean? And so, like, that kind of stuff, I have not seen that.
Okay. Let me ask you another question, because, you know, in my thing about like the movie is always better than the book, or a derivative is oftentimes better than the original. And by that, I mean, like, we could talk about 3-act structure and where it started, but everything is 3-act structure now in movies and whatnot. So wherever it started, it did become something very good now today, where you watch a movie and you're not paying attention to the fact that that it's a 3-act structure. You're just paying attention to it has an arc. You keep talking about the arc, right? Looking at all the allegory in the movie The Matrix, for instance, or all the Marvel. Yeah, what's that?
So you and The Matrix.
The Matrix, amazing. The Matrix, like, to me, the Matrix trilogy has way more than anybody's canon to me in terms of number of like Christian allegory and political, philosophical across different cultures. It's all embedded in there, and they did it on purpose. Like, you can read the script and you can see where the Indian philosophy is in there, where the Christian philosophy is, where the historical references, all that. Even Cornel West added some things to part of the trilogy that helped them with their philosophy. But even aside from that, like the superhero movies all have what could be considered a Shakespearean undertone to them, right?
The hero's journey.
Yeah. So wouldn't that deliver the same kind of effect for people if they're reading these deep and meaningful superhero stories, for instance, or watching, you know, these superhero meanings? The themes are the same. The themes that they're getting, the information is just delivered differently.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing. Like, we don't just teach themes. We also teach language. We also teach structure. And what I would prefer to do is to teach like some of the foundational stuff. Like, this is kind of where hero's journey came from, and this is where you might see it pop up. And this is, you know, this is that structure that you're seeing. And I mean, that's a difference between like what counts as literature and what doesn't. Like, I'm a teacher of literature. I'm not a teacher of like discourse studies or like whatever. And Tangi just said teachers don't actually read the text to understand the material on a deep level. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing some work right now. I'm doing some work right now with some teachers that are using curriculum, and it's just like, did you guys understand the book? And I don't think that they do.
Wow.
And it's just because that subject knowledge is just missing, because it's difficult to have a deep understanding of a text if you don't know what to do when, you know, you haven't been taught it, or how to develop your own understanding, or where to go, or even what to do when you encounter a text. Like I was in a classroom, in a middle school classroom, and like the kids would just listen to the audiobook for 40 minutes, and then they'd fill out some questions and put them in a box every day.
Wow.
Yeah. No discussion of it. Just listen to the book, here's some questions, put them in the box every day.
So, you know, as we're talking, I'm thinking about some other books that did hit home for me when I was younger. And I completely forgot about some of them. So I wonder where these fit in with what you're talking about. Like The Lord of the Flies was a book that I read, and for some reason it resonated because it was a bunch of badass kids. I mean, maybe that was it. Books like that, Animal Farm, you know, Orwell and stuff like that. Is that part of what you consider to be canonical works of literature?
Yes.
Okay. So that fits in. So it's not really just this old English thing or this.
No, the people that make those arguments are just, I don't know why they make them. Like, why aren't we reading the old books? Like, that's how I feel like they're talking. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand where that idea is coming from. Like, we talked about Plato in my theory of knowledge class the last year I was in high school. And this was for the IB program. But like the general classroom, you're not going to die if you don't talk about Plato. It's useful because you can like learn about, the Socratic method, that's Socrates, but like stuff like that. But like,
I mean, there's probably like a lot of thinking around for one group of people, it's about defending Western culture, not Western culture, Western civilization.
Yeah.
So like they will locate much of what they believe and love in the world in like in some cases, Shakespeare is the young people amongst the culture that they're trying to preserve. They're really thinking about Rome and Athens, you know, and Greece. And anything you do to disturb that, you are attempting to say that Western civilization is actually wrong and is not right. Which leads me, that's why I asked you the question about like Orwell and others, which are,
they're more contemporary. They're more I'm not going to call them. They're more contemporary, but like again, canon grows and shifts and changes. Like,
they're old at this point, though.
They're older at this point. So is Zora Neale Hurston.
Yes, Audre Lorde is even. You know, like I mean, come on, like and Baldwin.
like they're newer, but they're still old. But what about, they're not even being taught.
What about Coates? You know, stuff like Between the World and Me. It's not necessarily literature, but it's in the James Baldwin tradition. You feel like that could be taught in a way that is rich and meaningful.
Yes, it's beautifully written. He's a phenomenal writer. My only concern with that particular book is I feel like it kind of like fetishizes like Black pain. And so that's my only concern. It's not well written. Like it's just like how to fit that in without it just being like, well, the world is going to end. If you're Black, you're never going to get ahead. Sorry. So that's my only worry with that one. Is making sure that kids don't walk away feeling that way. But then also, like, doesn't he like live in a penthouse in Manhattan? Like,
he does, but I will say this about him, which I think is really rich and important, is he grew up in basically a library. His dad has one of the biggest libraries of Black texts anywhere. And he grew up in that. He actually like literally lived in the texts of all Black authors and whatnot. So I would say if he's talented, he should be, because he grew up in a pretty rich soil with a dad that was like a collector, a book collector. And he got to see all that stuff. So that's all part of him now. I'm being shamed, just so you know, right now by Michelle Johnson, who's like shaming me in the comments about like, I hope the 8 Black hands have fun with you on Sunday about loving Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I don't care. You know, I just put it out there like Chris Stewart is not somebody who cares. I do not care.
You do not care.
I'm just going to put it out there. Yeah. Listen, that was a good book. It was well written from end to end. I kept expecting something different to happen than happened, and it ended ended on a note that I did not expect it to end on, which was disappointing because I was expecting somewhere in there was going to be something a little bit more provocative, but there wasn't. Mm-hmm. But it was still very good. So I want to jump real quick to kind of what I saw you tweet yesterday. Oh. So this is getting back to our point about we're in a moment right now between woke and unwoke people fighting. One of the things that they are fighting about is what we should teach and how we should teach it. There are, I made it a little too simple when I said that there's the disrupted text people and there's the canonical people. I think we just did a good job to say, even with on the canonical side, there's a difference between the people that believe that everything is about Western civilization and those who believe that canonical texts are a rather than the, like it's an a canon rather than the canon. But we're also seeing a lot of these anti-woke articles. I'm going to click to the article real quick here. So this is
gave him a click.
Yeah. So there's this article right now: to combat woke classrooms, go to the source, university education programs. And there's a lot in here that kind of misrepresents what critical race theory is.
Yep.
There's a lot in here that misrepresents what political progressives are attempting to do in education to broaden the view on it. It got passed around by a lot of people who tend to agree with us on a lot of things.
I know.
That's what puts us in a really bad situation is that we so do believe in pedagogy and pedagogical reforms and quality and teacher quality and all of those things. But sometimes the people that agree with us on those things and give us a lot of yay boys and attaboys,
they say junk like that.
Yeah, they're problematic, and sometimes in some ways where I don't think that they know it, but their cultural chauvinism actually comes out. And then it's our problem because we're so tagged by them. We're tagged into their work all the time. They love us in some ways. What got under your skin about this enough for you to actually tweet about it and say another article that has the same lukewarm tropes and foundational misunderstanding of the stuff it aims to critique? And then you even call out here people that we know and work with who are tagged in this story. What got under your skin about this?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, part of it is just the author itself. I feel like in the last 6 months, they've just been misrepresenting a lot of things and just blatantly lying. They had a tweet that said they were we made Black Lives Matter friendship bracelets in teacher prep, and no, you didn't. That's just a lie. And so it's just really just kind of lying to try to get followers up. And then just what it is about that article is it's just kind of picking random articles to try to make a point. But there's just so little understanding of the stuff that it's critiquing. It's bothering me. And so it's I go ahead and critique this idea that there's no right answer in math. But it's not just it's just a woke thing. And I'm you don't even know what they're saying because you just read what James Lindsay said about it. You know what I mean? So it's there's that person in particular. I feel they don't do enough reading, but they're positioning themselves as an expert and people are eating it up. And that's what's bothering me. And it also kind of makes me consider, if people are agreeing with what I'm saying, but then also agreeing with that, how am I positioning my own arguments? And so that's a thing for me too. It's just I gotta be very clear about where I stand on things. The Western canon is not white dudes to me. The canon does not exist to me. You see a couple tweets back, I'm just abolish the police. I'm still, my joke is just I'm actually kind of woke, but just not Twitter woke.
You're not over woke.
Yeah, I'm not. But
woke-ish.
Woke-ish, yeah. Woke-ish. I'm awake.
Yeah. And so there you go. That's what you are, because you know what? That's the proper English too. So you're awake. I'm just awake. Yes. I actually love that you made this point because you made it right at the moment that I was feeling the exact same thing, which is that my friends that agree with me on things like pedagogical improvements and strong teaching, strong learning, are problematic in ways that I don't always feel. But right now it's becoming a moment where they are showing their tails.
Yep.
And they are putting me in a bad situation because I'm not the Candace Owens of education. I'm not here to beat up on my own
not
people.
Not at all.
I'm not here to be your whipping boy, your whip on my own people. I'm not here to be that. I'm not here to just, I have lots of criticisms and critique of people on the left and progressives and educational progressives specifically, because they are so lost in their own kind of nonsense. They're like alphabet soup of weird ideas that they're worthy of ridicule. That doesn't mean that the people on the right don't have their things too.
Exactly. Like they'll be like, you mean we're not teaching proper English? And I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Like that proper thing doesn't exist. There's different rules for each. Like I'm like, I speak African-American English. We grew up speaking that. It's not incorrect. It has a different set of rules. So when I talk to kids, I'm like, we're going to be practicing this way because of X, Y, and Z. I don't just say, you're going to stop talking the incorrect way. And that's what I feel like the anti-wokes do. And I'm like, no, not at all.
Anybody, like any person who interviews people for jobs these days, let's just put AAVE off the table for a second. So-called Black English, African-American vernacular English. Let's just put that to the side for a second as a variant of the American English that oftentimes gets, whatever, shown to be whatever it is. But if you interview people for a job, there's a white millennial language also that could be considered like AAVE. It really could.
Really? White millennial. What's white millennial language like?
It is not. So what triggered me to say this is when you said proper English, right? When people, what do you mean we're not going to teach proper English? My feedback on that is, do you think your kids speak proper English?
Right.
Have you ever interviewed 100 people for a job? Do you think they speak proper English? Do you really think that's what they're speaking? They speak this weird language of abbreviations and unfinished and unstructured sentences, lots of uptalk, with the voice going up at the end of a sentence, making things sound like questions that aren't really questions, not speaking in a way that is straightforward, confident with the normal sentence construction that you would be speaking if you spoke proper English, right? But they don't call that out. That is their variant of AAVE, and then there's all these like filler words and weasel words that people put into conversation. Now, I feel like, no, you don't feel like, that's not what you actually mean to say. That's not, there's a difference between a feeling and a thought. And if you don't know the difference between those two things, then you're not speaking proper English, right? Proper English, but it never gets called out. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I just do think that people who are so firm on what culture should be, and it should be to the right, and they have the right one, they're problematic for us. And I'm glad that you called out, very specific people, because there's people in our camp, in our support group, who very clearly believe they know every damn thing. And some of them don't have the receipts that they say on the teaching and the learning and the schooling. And I'm just going to leave it there. But I'm glad you called this out. Did you get any heat? Did you get any pushback for these tweets?
So I don't think so. So I have the thing about me, because I'm not like, you can't pin me down. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm for Black people. Like that's what it is. If something's good, I'm going to take it. If it's not, then whatever. I don't care who has it. But I have a lot of people like on the woke left that follow me. But I also have a lot of people on like the canon that also follow me. So people probably just saw my comments like, wait, what? And I had a couple people DM me like, I just so appreciate your thinking. Like, because about that. So it's like people want to say something, but they're kind of afraid to. And they're like, I feel like something might be off about this. And then I call it out. Normally I wouldn't, but I'm just like, I am concerned that I'm getting lumped in with that. And that's not who I am. Or how I think about teaching and learning.
Well, I love that you were brave, that you stepped out there and said it, because you're someone in some ways, there needs to be more of you, people who can actually have a foot in different areas of the debate, like, not just be one thing, not be pigeonholed. But I do think that there needs to be more people who are strong on the academic part, strong on the teaching and the learning and the science and the pedagogy of teaching part, but are not culturally Candace Owens replicas, people who just say whatever the school choice side of things wants us to say, or the right side of things, without ever challenging them on anything. We're not always going to win a lot of friends by doing that. But I can't actually, as a self-respecting Black man in the United States, regardless of how I feel about the things we agree on, allow you to put me in the situation or put you in the situation where we have to defend the indefensible, right? Mm-hmm. We had a man die who had a police knee on his neck for 9 minutes in this city. The police department in the initial report was going to write that off as he died from other causes, and that was going to be the end of story. Mm-hmm. If there hadn't been a 17-year-old girl standing there with a camera, with a cell phone and videoing that for the full time, this would be a very different story in terms of justice and how it plays out. Our friends who support us on very specific, discrete educational issues, if they can't get that we're fuller people than just reading science, they don't get us. And they have to be made to get us and to understand it. I'll give you the last word. What do you want people to know about what you're seeing as like most important at this moment for our kids as an educator? Like what's the heaviest thing on your mind right now just about getting our kids in education?
I mean, I don't even know if I have a last word. It's very difficult I don't even know how to say this. I don't know how to make kids feel like there's hope right now. And that's difficult because I kind of feel like that. And so that's my issue is I can't take how my own principles how I might feel about those things and tell those to kids because they still have their whole lives to try to do something else. And to, not be demoralized. And so even if you don't know if there's hope or whatever, like you can't tell kids that there's no point. You have to try because that's like the history of our people is that we just keep going forward no matter what it's like. And so that's all I can say is teach the heck out of your kids and make them feel successful and confident and protect them as much as you can in your classroom.
Well, I just actually want to say I so respect what you do and the position that you're playing. Your writing is very clear and to the point. I love people who make things clear for us, for the public, and specifically for our people. Right. So you're doing a real kind of service in the world. You're doing double duty. You're teaching in the classroom or teaching with kids as a profession, but also you're writing. And you're making this more visible for a larger group of people, which is what we need. Because we don't all live in classrooms every day. We don't see what goes on there. We really don't. We're parents. We're out here. Right now, I'm having a very rough time with remote learning. That's my world in terms of what's going on. So it's nice to have educators kind of say, like, let me frame some of the issue for you. So you're doing an amazing job of that. I hope you do stay in Minnesota for as long as we have this gap in outcomes, because our kids in Minnesota are hurting. I'm sure they're hurting in a lot of places, but there are times that I just want to move up to Canada and be like done with it. And who knows, maybe I'd find the same thing in Canada that we have here. But if people watching this or listening, you want to find Jasmine, you can find her on Twitter at Miss Jasmine MN. That's her handle. And Miss is just MS. So MS Jasmine MN. You can find her on Twitter. Her Twitter feed is actually, I think, one to watch because she is level-headed. She is insightful and smart. And the people who engage with her Twitter feed also bring kind of like differences of opinion. So it's kind of interesting to watch. So I'd say definitely go and take a look at her there. What's your blog, Miss Jasmine, so that people know?
I think it's just called jasmineteaches.wordpress. I made it when I was in grad school and I didn't actually expect it to be a real blog. That's the funny thing. Like I had to do it for an assignment. And I was like, nah, fine. But now it's a thing.
Well, it's a very good blog, and knowing that that's the origin story. So people go find Miss Jasmine's blog, and you can also find her on CitizenEd. So if you go to citizen.education /author /Jasmine-Lane. That's a lot. That's a mouthful, but it's in the comments. You can also find her there. Thank you again, Jasmine. Appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who's listening and watching today. Giving us an hour of your time every day to talk about education is it's a major win to me, because the more we come around, the more we circle the wagons around good ideas around education for our kids, or even the problems that they're facing, the more progress